Hi everyone and welcome back. My name is Paige Hulse and I am the attorney behind Paige Hulse Law. I'm an attorney for creative entrepreneurs, and today we are going to talk about everything you need to know about keeping your blog legal. Now, I know when you started your blog, or if you have a business and you're thinking about starting your blog, that seems like a very low risk activity, and honestly it generally is, as long as you know the general steps to take to stay legal and to stay within those legal parameters. So that being said, what are the things that you need to know what's the roadmap that you need to keep your blog legal? In the show notes below this video, I will include a link to a free 10-step download guide that I've created, and this is a guide that I use in my own business anytime somebody comes to me. And that being said, the first thing that anybody who is starting a blog or who has a blog needs to keep in mind is you need to make sure that your name is legal, which sounds really rudimentary, I know. But the last thing you want to do is go through the whole process of starting the blog and all of the work that goes into that behind the scenes, just to have to rename or rebrand yourself later on down the road. The second thing that you're going to need to do is make sure your website is legal. I'm going to be talking a lot more in detail about this on another video episode, but I want you to know that there are certain documents that you have to have in place on your website, especially as a blog, in order to stay legal. The first is an FTC requirement. So this is a federal law that you have to comply with. If you're gathering any sort of information from the users of your website, such as like an email opt-in, if you're selling any products to them, there's a whole other list of times this would become applicable. Also, if you're using Google Analytics to track any user's information, I have a whole list of other situations. I think there's like 15 total that you need to be aware of. When those situations come into play, when any of those are applicable, you are going to have a privacy policy in place. And if, for example, you have an email opt-in on your website, or on your blog, but you don't have a privacy policy, that is actually breaking the FTC federal government rules on internet usage. So that's a must. That's something that you have to have in place. Something that you should have in place, so something that's not a federal law, but is something that is just best business practices, you are going to need to have a terms and conditions for your website in place on your site. That is essentially a contract between you and the user of your website, and that is going to lay out all of the terms for use of your site. That's going to lay out, for example, what content people can share from your site and what is specifically yours. It can lay out what kind of comments you allow on your site, all sorts of things. And that's also a place where you can have disclaimers in place for your site, which we're going to get to again in a minute, because that's a big one for many bloggers. But your terms and conditions are actually a binding contract between you and the user. And if some sort of issue arose later, that's a document that the court will actually enforce as a valid contract between you and the user. So when I phrase it that way, it's usually pretty easy to see why that's a document that you want to have in place. So I mentioned a little bit a minute ago, but you are also going to want to have disclaimers in place if they're applicable. Disclaimers are, again, that's something that you're going to have to really evaluate your business and see when they are specific, when they apply to you specifically. I think the best rule of thumb is going to be if you're ever interviewing anybody with any sort of licensed professional opinion, so that means a lawyer, a doctor, that can be somebody that gives out parenting advice or psychological advice or anything like that, you're going to want to have a disclaimer in place. Financial advice, that's another big one. You're going to want to have a disclaimer in place on your website, somewhere visible. Usually I would put it in the footer of the website. That's where mine is on my own website. And you want that there so that people know, hey, even though I might be talking about, let's say, financial matters on my blog, I'm not actually trying to give you any sort of advice on how you should act in your own business or in your own life. just like the disclaimer that I started this video with. That disclaimer can also be included, and it probably should also be included in your terms and conditions for your website. So disclaimers are something that bloggers need to be very, very aware of, because there have been cases where bloggers have given just, blanket advice, and somebody took that advice without, of course, even speaking to the blogger, and had some sort of, bad repercussions from it, and came back and sued the blogger later on. So that's a situation where a disclaimer can protect you from somebody acting crazy and taking your blog and misconstruing it. The fourth thing that you're going to need is the correct contracts in place. Now, contracts are going to mostly be applicable for bloggers in terms of if you do any sort of affiliate work or anything along those lines. Again, I have a guide out that I will also link in the show notes that will go into more details on what you need to keep your affiliate programs legal, and what you should be looking for to stay legal as an affiliate for somebody else's brand as well. But just keep in mind that you are going to need the correct affiliate contracts in place. You're also going to need contracts if you have any sort of like brand reps or brand representatives, or if you have any employees or independent contractors like a VA or an intern or anything like that, or if you do any freelance writing for somebody else, you are going to have the right contracts there to protect your business. Okay, so moving on, I guess, I think it's our fourth topic, but this is actually our number one most relevant topic for bloggers, is using images legally, both online and on your blog. This comes up on blogs, I think, most commonly with like blog roundups or whatever they're called, where you might feature like the best, the best Halloween costume ideas, and you will pull 10 images of people that you find online with Halloween costumes or whatever it is that you want to showcase on your blog, or like a home tour or anything like that. In order to use images, somebody else's images, legally online, you have got to get their express consent or their implied consent. But either way, you're going to need to have their consent. This is an issue as an attorney for creative entrepreneurs who are usually marketing their businesses online or on social media. This is an issue that I'm honestly seeing every single day. You cannot regram somebody else's image without getting consent. You cannot do any sort of blog roundup or showcase any images on your blog without the owners of that image consent. So how do you go about doing this? I mentioned that there are two kinds of consent. There's implied consent and express consent. Implied consent is a little bit more technical. I won't really get into that too much today. But that arises when you have been, when you've been given an image, and even though you have not had a conversation with the owner of that image, you've been given that image with the blanket permission to use the image however you would like to. Express consent is exactly what it sounds like, and that means that they have to expressly give you their consent for you to use that image on your blog or social media. On Instagram, this happens. I literally see it happen every single day. People regram other people's images and assume, even if they use like that regram app that leaves the watermark on the image, they assume that they can just use the image as they would like on their own Instagram. And that's not true. You have to have consent. I cannot say it enough. So if you see somebody's image that you would like to showcase on your blog, or on your social media, send them a message, send them an email, comment on that Instagram post, comment in a direct message, or contact their, somebody on their website team to ask for permission. This is the number one way, like I said, that bloggers can get into trouble. Anytime that you are not using an image without consent or without permission to use it, you are committing copyright infringement, and that is the easiest way to open yourself up and your blog or your business up to liability. Probably, and once people know that that's the law, then it's very intuitive and it's easy to understand how to use the law and how to apply that properly. Just make sure anytime you're using an image that you didn't personally take, that you know you have permission to use that image. That includes any images that you find on Pinterest too. That's anything that you find online. I don't care if you Google an image, you have to find the user or the owner of that image and get their permission to use it. Now, on the flip side, you are going to want to protect your own blog from being stolen, or any content from it being stolen or ripped off in any way on somebody else's blog. So I already mentioned it a little bit, but the best way to protect yourself from those scenarios is going to be to have those terms and conditions in place, so that anytime anybody is using your blog, they have to abide by those terms. And there should be a phrase in there that says something like, you do not have my permission to reshare any content or images from my blog without my permission. The other easy way to protect yourself would be to put a copyright notice on the footer of your website. This is kind of just laying claim. It's letting the world know that you're laying claim to the copyright, your inherent copyright protection that you have just from creating the blog. That being said, it also is possible to copyright actual blog posts, which is something that I see bloggers sometimes do, just to actually have that registered copyright protection supporting you. This isn't something that is going to be necessarily applicable unless you're, unless you're getting, ripped off very frequently and you want to be able to go after somebody in court and stop them from using your content. That's kind of the only time that becomes really applicable for you. So the last layer of protection that you need to have in place for your blog is you need to make sure that you're paying all of your taxes properly and that you are abiding by all employment laws. As far as taxes go, I am not a tax attorney and I do not want to be a tax attorney. So I would tell you, if you were to ask me, to go find an accountant in your city or in your state that you trust who can give you valid advice when it comes to taxes. But if you're making a certain amount of money from your blog, the state is going to require you to have your EIN number in place and to have to be paying your appropriate taxes. Again, I'm not going to go into that too much today, but at least know that you need to go ask an accountant that question. When it comes to hiring, there will probably be a point where you start to outsource some work from your blog to somebody else to help you out, which is always a good idea for a business owner to do. But that's not something that's not a decision to be entered into lightly. If you're going to be hiring anybody to help you with your blog, you need to stay very cognizant of the difference between employees and independent contractors. And I have multiple resources up on my website that go into the differences between the two, so that you can do a check. But if you are incorrectly classifying your employees as independent contractors, that's something that the IRS governs very, very diligently, and that's something that can get you in hot water very quickly. You'll be liable for things like back taxes and overtime pay and just a whole gambit of other issues that come into effect if you've been found to have misclassified your employees. So that's something that you need to educate yourself on very diligently before you ever make your first hire. And I will also link a guide in the notes below this video that I've also created that helps you break down the differences between an independent contractor and employee, and helps you know what steps to take to make each one of those people a legal hire in your business, as well as interns. So that being said, that is the basic, just quick overview of what you need to know to keep your blog legal. Again, you're going to need to go through all of those 10 steps that I referenced in my guide, just to keep the business itself legal, because once you start making money, you are a business. So you're going to need to be taking into account considerations like when you need to become an LLC, if you need to file a DBA, all of that kind of stuff. Aside from just the general business legalities, you need to know that to keep your blog legal, you need to keep your website legal, of course. You need to be using images legally. Don't commit any copyright infringement on your blog. And just make sure that you have the owner's consent to use any images or video on your blog. Also stay very cognizant of when any disclaimers are necessary, or any affiliate links, anything like that are necessary. And then finally, make sure that you are paying your taxes properly and that you are hiring properly and classifying your hires properly. If you have any questions about anything that I've talked about today, feel free to reach out to me at hello@paigeholst.com. I love hearing from people, and I am always looking for new content to add that is actually helpful to creatives. I don't want to just put stuff out there that is just, you know, more noise. That's the last thing that we need. So that being said, if you have any questions you would like answered, send them my way, and you might just see them answered in a video here soon. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next week.